hell can attain. However, O my Lord, you are so kind that you bestow mercy even upon them. Onto the purport. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, 7th chapter, there are two kinds of devotees. Those who desire material pleasures and those who desire nothing but service to the Lord. Material pleasures can be attained even by hogs and dogs, whose condition of life is hellish. The hog also eats, sleeps, and enjoys sex life to its full extent, and it is also very satisfied with such hellish enjoyment of material existence. Modern yogis advise that because one has senses, one must enjoy to the fullest extent like cats and dogs. Yet one can go on and practice yoga. This is condemned here by Kardama Muni. He says that such material pleasures are available for cats and dogs in a hellish condition. The Lord is so kind that if so-called yogis are satisfied by hellish pleasures, He can give them facilities to attain all the material pleasures they desire, but they cannot attain the perfectional stage attained by Kardama Muni. Hellish and demoniac persons do not actually know what is the ultimate attainment in perfection, and therefore they think that sense gratification is the highest goal of life. They advise that one can satisfy the senses and at the same time, by reciting some mantra and by some practice, they can cheaply aspire for perfection. Such persons are described here as hatamedasaha, which means those whose brains are spoiled. They aspire for material enjoyment by perfection of yoga or meditation. In Bhagavad Gita, it is stated by the Lord that the intelligence of those who worship the demigods has been spoiled. Similarly, here too it is stated by Kardama Muni that one who aspires after material enjoyment by practice of yoga has spoiled his brain and is full number one. Actually, the intelligent practitioner of yoga should aspire for nothing else but to cross over the urge of nescience by worshipping the personality of Godhead, and to see the lotus feet of the Lord. The Lord is so kind, however, that even today, persons whose brain substance is spoiled are given the benediction to become cats, dogs, or hogs, and enjoy material happiness from sex life and sense gratification. The Lord confirmed this benediction in Bhagavad Gita. Whatever a person aspires to receive from me, I offer him as he desires. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. On to Mangla. Om Jnana Timirandhasya Jnana Jana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Gurun Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Sha Shri Rupam Shagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Prajana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitam Sha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagat Pater Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpata Rubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadaya Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Once again, welcome to this morning's Srimad Bhagavatam class. Today we are reading from Canto 3, Chapter 21, text number 14. This is continuing on from once Vidura inquires about Manu's dynasty moving forward. Maitreya Muni starts to go into the pastime of Kardama Muni. So just recently, Kardama Muni did 10,000 years of penance, tapasya, and once that was done, Lord Krishna gives him his personal darshan. So this is the second verse of his prayers. His prayers start in text 13. Text 14 is obviously the second verse. This verse is very, very important. And essentially, this is what he's saying to Krishna while he's in front of him. So with that in mind, we'll proceed. The first thing we'll focus on is the first word. The first word, if you have the verse in front of you, it's yeah. Now, Srila Prabhupada has translated yeah to mean those persons. Now, a bit of context. Kardama Muni is standing, he's right in front of Lord Vishnu himself. And Krishna is before him personally. This opportunity is very rare. It isn't something that we get very easily. However, even though the Lord is right in front of Kardama Muni is thinking about other people. He's thinking about us. This should be the mood that we should approach this verse. This verse is for us. It's an instruction for us. In this particular verse, there are around 3 different instructions. There are 3 different sentences there. So we should understand that the Kardama Muni is saying this for our benefit. That, you could say, is the quality of the devotees. We can see all of our past acharyas, whether it's the Guru Parampara, Srila Prabhupada, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, the list goes on. All of them play an instructing role in our lives. So this is an example of a verse where a pure devotee is instructing us, telling us what is for our benefit. And Guru Maharaj, His Holiness Janananda Goswami Maharaj, he gave the instruction that it is the job of a devotee to always guide in Krishna consciousness in devotional service. That's always what pleased Srila Prabhupada the most. And what is even more important is that the devotees, the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, or those who were disciples of his disciples, they should try and follow those instructions. He was giving one pastime. One time, Srila Prabhupada was in Bhaktivedanta Manor. Those who have been to the manor will know it is very big. And Srila Prabhupada was there. There were a lot of devotees. And while he was staying, not randomly, of course, by his transcendental will, he decided to go on a walk. So he left his room around the afternoon, maybe around 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. He left his room from the top floor, and there was one devotee who was in front of the door, saw Srila Prabhupada was going for a walk. Prabhupada, when he thought like this, he carried Srila Prabhupada's shoes, and he followed Srila Prabhupada. Now, Srila Prabhupada walked in to the back of the Bhaktivedanta Manor, the temple hall. He walked through the back. There were only 2 devotees. There were 3 devotees, actually. The first devotee was a temple pujari. Second devotee was Guru Maharaj, he was sitting. And a third devotee was one model. She was a new devotee. She started chanting. She was taken to Krishna consciousness very seriously. So when Srila Prabhupada came, he came unexpectedly. So naturally, they offered their obeisances. Srila Prabhupada noticed that Guru Maharaj obviously offered obeisances correctly, but the model had her feet slightly facing towards the deities. So Srila Prabhupada saw this, and then he walked straight up to the altar, and he asked, "Where's the pujari?" And the pujari, it was a Mataji, she came, and then she said, "Yes, Srila Prabhupada." Srila Prabhupada asked that Mataji, "What are you doing?" Now the temple pujari said, "I'm washing the pots, Srila Prabhupada, washing the dishes." Srila Prabhupada said, No, what are you doing?" Now this pujari was a bit stuck. What do you say? Then Srila Prabhupada said, "A guest has come to the temple, and it is the duty of a pujari to guide the devotees in Krishna consciousness. It is your duty to show the devotee, to show the guest how to offer obeisances properly." So this obviously made there was a very, very strong statement. It is the duty of the pujari, or the pure devotees, to show us, or show the people in general, how to surrender unto the Lord. So Srila Prabhupada then personally demonstrated. By then 10 or 15 devotees came, and he showed everyone how to offer obeisances directly. And Srila Prabhupada just was in that mood of that teaching mood that he was teaching us what was the right thing to do and how to actually surrender properly. Then he turned And there was devotee who was right behind him carrying Srila Prabhupada's shoes inside the temple room in front of the deities. And Srila Prabhupada immediately started chastising, "What are you doing? Why do you have the shoes here?" And the devotee was confused, was stuck, so he got his chadar, put the shoes under the chadar, tried to cover it. I mean, what would you do in that situation? And then Srila Prabhupada said, "This is another nonsense." So the summary is that the devotees, they tried to instruct for our benefit. So in that mood, we will proceed to the translation. I'll repeat the translation one more time. Here, Karadama Muni is saying, "Your lotus feet are the true vessel to take one across the ocean of mundane niscience. Only persons deprived of their intelligence by the spell of the deluding energy worship those feet with the view to attain the trivial and momentary pleasures of the senses, which even persons rotting in hell can attain. However, O my Lord, you are so kind that you bestow mercy even upon them." So in this particular verse, there are 3 main points. They're divided into sentences. The first sentence confirms that Lord Krishna's feet takes us across the ocean of mundane niscience. The second sentence is those who are unintelligent, who Srila Prabhupada writes who have spoiled intelligence. Those who are intelligent worship Krishna with a view to get something in return. So here the Prabhupada elaborates and says for material gain or for sense gratification. Finally, the final point is that Krishna bestows his mercy even to these people as in those who try and worship Krishna to get something in return, just out of his kindness. So the first point is that Krishna's feet takes us over the ocean of material niscience. Now, a bit of context again. Srila Prabhupada confirms that Karadama Muni is right in front of Lord Krishna himself. And just the second verse, Karadama Muni already goes towards Krishna's lotus feet. Karadama Muni, what is very interesting, he doesn't say you are the vessel to take us across the ocean of mundane niscience. He says your lotus feet are the vessel to take us over the material ocean. So this is very, very powerful and very important for devotees. The first instruction is that devotees must always understand that the feet of the Lord always come first. The feet is where we surrender. The feet is where we should first offer our respects to. If we go to the Shishaftakam prayers that we just recited, these Shishaftakam prayers, they're not any ordinary verses. They are 8 key instructions that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu give for our benefit, surrounding 2 things. The first purpose of those instructions is to cultivate the right mood for separation. The second is how we should actually propagate our chanting. And there we already know, the 5th verse, Kripaya Tavapada Pankaja. So our goal is to be eternally situated as the atoms of the Lord's lotus feet. The reason is that this is our safest position. The risk there's no risk to actually fall back again into the material world afterwards. So devotees must always focus on the feet. We all know that very famous verse, Kunti Bharani speaks, 1.8.22, Namaha Pankaja Nabhaya, Namaha Pankaja Malane, Namaha Pankaja Netraya, Namaste Pankajangrihe. We all know that in the purport, Srila Prabhupada confirms that devotees must focus on the lotus feet of the Lord. And this is even elaborated on Nectar of Devotion, chapter 36. In this particular chapter, those who've read will know that there are a list of different pastimes. There, Srila Prabhupada, he gives us philosophy through evidence. So he gives us a range of pastimes, and he mentions one pastime of Kaliya. Now, Kaliya, as we know, was a very poisonous serpent, very envious. And just by being chastised by Krishna, by being constantly kicked on the head multiple times, he came to his senses. And Srila Prabhupada confirms that this is an example of a person surrendering and taking short of Krishna's lotus feet. So it isn't just a one-off situation. We could see that all throughout the Bhagavatam, all throughout the pastimes out there, we can see that the lotus feet is very important. I've made this point quite a few times, so it might be repetition for some, but we know that the lotus feet of the Lord has certain marks that are engraved on it. His Holiness Achyuta Maharaj, he confirms that the signs that are in the Lord's lotus feet, they all confirm different benedictions that Krishna gives to his devotees. Often as devotees we ask, why should we surrender to the lotus feet? Why can't we surrender to, the Lord himself? The reason is because if we look, I think there are 11 different symbols, signs on Krishna's lotus feet. And all of these signs actually reaffirm how Krishna actually helps us cross the material ocean. Firstly, we know that there is a half moon that is at the lotus feet at the bottom. The half moon, essentially, Achyuta Maharaj confirms that it is a representative of the cooling rays that the Lord gives to extinguish the devotees from the suffering of the three modes of material nature. There is also a bow, but that bow doesn't have a string attached to it. Now that bow is meant to symbolize, according to Achyuta Maharaj, that once we surrender to Lord Hari, once we surrender to Lord Krishna, Krishna takes away our false ego. It also means that once we surrender to Krishna, there is nothing else to aim for. Normally in archery, we have to aim towards something. There's no point doing archery if you don't have a string attached to it. This is pointless. So here we can understand that the bow is there, so we need to understand that once we attain Krishna, we do not need to attain anything else. There is also a thunderbolt that smashes our mountains of sinful activities that have been accumulated over millions and millions of lifetimes. There is a thunderbolt that is meant to protect us from the reaction of those sinful activities. So like that, to thrive in spiritual life, to thrive in Krishna consciousness, the lotus feet is very, very important. Once we surrender to the Lord's lotus feet, it becomes very, very easy to progress further. So therefore, essentially, Achyuta Muni in the first point is saying that we have to surrender to the Lord's lotus feet. In the second sentence, Achyuta Muni says that the lotus feet are the true vessel that take a person over the ocean of mundane nescience. Now, what is nescience? It's a very interesting, I'm probably not pronouncing it correctly. Nescience essentially means the state of not knowing. So, in other words, ignorance. Those who are in ignorance, they are in nescience. So, this material world, Srila Prabhupada has explained, this material world is essentially an ocean of ignorance. People are in the mode of ignorance, and it is very, once we dive in, we get deeper and deeper, we get more entangled. So it's very interesting that to get rid of ignorance, one needs to get knowledge. But here Srila Prabhupada confirms that the process to come out of ignorance is not actually pursuing knowledge itself, but rather to surrender to the Lord's lotus feet. Now, in the Nectar of Devotion, in chapter 32, it does say that there are many instances in Vedic writings of persons who aspire after liberation by speculative knowledge, but they gave us this process in order to take shelter of the lotus feet of Krishna. Time and time again, if we look in our Shastra, look in our scriptures, we can see that there have been people who have tried to, try and obtain knowledge for speculative reasons. However, just by surrendering onto the Lord's lotus feet, they have crossed all of that, and they are now in the highest stage. His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj says that those who are advanced and highly qualified, they worship Kali Yuga because by such worship, the age of Kali, because in this age, simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, one can advance his spiritual knowledge and attain life's goal. So because of surrendering on the lotus feet of Krishna, one can attain what can't be obtained by many, many years and millions of years of speculation. And one very interesting point is that Achyuta Muni here is very conclusive. He says that the Lord's lotus feet are the true vessel. Now, one can ask, why did Srila Prabhupada write the word true? Vessel itself, I think, is fairly... we can understand what vessel means. What does the word true represent? Now, essentially, this means that any knowledge that teaches us to surrender to Krishna is the most true and it's the most accurate. According to Achyuta Muni, it's the most true. So if we want to end our suffering in this material world, we'll have to try and focus on this true path, which is to surrender to the lotus feet of the Lord. Because we have Srimad Bhagavatam in front of us, Srimad Bhagavatam teaches us how to surrender unto the Lord's lotus feet. That is the most important thing. Because of that, there is no need to study any other scripture. In the Skanda Puran, 2.5.16, 40 to 42, there Vyasadeva writes something very, very interesting. Vyasadeva writes that in Kali Yuga, of what value are collections of hundreds of thousands of other scriptures? If one does not keep the Srimad Bhagavatam in his house, moving forward, he then says, O Muni, a person who faithfully recites a verse of Srimad Bhagavatam every day attains the fruit of reading the 18 Puranas. I repeat that last sentence one more time. O Muni, a person who faithfully recites a verse of Srimad Bhagavatam every day attains the fruit of reading 18 Puranas. Now, this is a very, very strong statement. Essentially, by reading, Vyasadeva is saying, by reading just one verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, there is no need to read anything else. The 18 Puranas, we get that benefit just by reading one verse. We can understand that Srimad Bhagavatam isn't an ordinary thing. It is the true vessel to actually obtain Krishna's lotus feet. So anything else, it will be very, very worthless if Bhagavatam is not there. The second point is hankering after material things. So the second sentence is, only person deprived of their intelligence by the spell of the deluding energy will worship those feet with a view to attain the trivial and momentary pleasures of the senses, which even persons rotting in hell can attain. Now, Maya is very, very strong. And as a result of Maya, as a result of our conditioned state in the material world, we can hanker to satisfy some desires that we have, some material desires. However, here Kardama Muni is saying that these trivial and momentary pleasures, a very interesting phrase, trivial and momentary pleasures, they can be satisfied even in the hellish planets. Now, material pleasures can be attained by, dogs and hogs, as the Prabhupada does say. So, I mean, we can see, like, a cat, a pig can be bathing in mud, eating stool, and they think themselves of the most happiest. We need to understand that the material pleasures can be obtained by any living entity. It can be obtained even in the hellish condition of life. It can be obtained even in the hellish planets. Now, it isn't wise to actually try and pursue these while rendering devotional service. Some people even go to the extent of going to Lord Krishna directly to actually, try and achieve this. So Prabhupada did give the example, just like in the Christian faith, we see Christians, of course, I'm not discriminating, I'm not, trying to offend, but Prabhupada did say that in some Christian, streams of faith, they go to the church and they say, "Oh God, please give me my daily loaf of bread." And they get that loaf of bread. Krishna arranges, he's so merciful, he arranges for them somewhere or the other. The next day they start again. So Prabhupada is saying that we shouldn't do like this. We shouldn't go to Krishna just to satisfy our material taste. Krishna will arrange, but we need to be very careful that the reason that we are in Krishna consciousness in the first place is to cut our desire. There is no other reason why we are in Krishna consciousness. We're not here to satisfy our senses. In Bhagavad Gita 7.6, there is a verse, you all might know this, Chatuvidya Bhajante Mam, Jnanasya Krituna Arjuna, Ertadignasa Ertadi, Jnanisya Bharatashaba. In that verse, Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, or Bhasa Bharatas, 4 kinds of pious men begin to render devotional service unto me: the distressed, the desire of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching for the knowledge of the Absolute. So there are 4 types of people who try and surrender unto Krishna, take to the path of Krishna consciousness. They are those who are distressed, those who desire some wealth, those who are inquisitive, and those who are genuinely searching for the Absolute Truth. Now, the top 3, the distressed, desire for wealth, and inquisitive, we can see that these 3 are, according to Kardama Muni, trivial and momentary pleasures. For example, the distressed. We know that if we are distressed, our primary desire is to be free from suffering. We could see an example, for example, Gajendra. Gajendra was being bitten by a crocodile for 1,000 celestial years, which is a very, very long time. And he he obviously lifted up the lotus flower, he surrendered to Krishna, but his objective was to get free of this suffering. Similarly, the next point is desiring wealth. So we know the pastime of Dhruva Maharaj. Dhruva Maharaj was offended, and then his goal for doing devotional service was simply to attain a kingdom better than his great-grandfather, which is very, very big, very, very hard to obtain, even bigger than Brahma himself. And inquisitive essentially means those who are trying to search for some knowledge. They're curious. Like we know in Chaitanya Charitamrita and also in the Bhagavatam as well, there is the pastime of the touchstone Brahmana. The Brahmana, I think it was Sanatana Goswami, the Brahmana who was after something that would give him the most pleasure. Lord Shiva directed him to Sanatana Goswami. He went and got a touchstone, but even then that didn't give him the right pleasure. So that is an example of inquisitive. So we need to understand that these three categories, the primary objective is to satisfy our senses or satisfy our desires. And here Kadama Muni is saying that these can be satisfied even in hell. If we're in hell, in hellish planets, hellish condition, our objective is always to try and be free from suffering. The same thing applies for all of these categories. One important thing we must be very careful to know as devotees is we must always remind ourselves, why are we in the temple? Why are we, going to Mangala Arati? Why are we listening to Bhagavatam class? What is the main objective of our spiritual life? Her Grace Lhasa, my Mataji, actually gave a very nice point one day. She was saying that we are in the temple not for time pass, not here to waste time. We're not here for sense gratification. Our objective should not be to satisfy our senses. This can be done by any other activity. She was saying, if you want to satisfy your senses, there's no need to be in Krishna consciousness. But our objective is not for sense gratification at all. It is to surrender to Krishna. Otherwise, if we try and satisfy our senses, it becomes a very, very dangerous situation to be in, even if we're in the temple. Guru Maharaj was giving one class in Muralamba farm, near Govardhan, and he was giving a pastime, again, in Bhaktivedanta Mano. There was one Sankirtan leader, and he was the Bhaktivedanta Manos, number one Simply Wonderful distributor. So he would distribute Simply Wonderfuls on Harinam Sankirtan like anything. But his policy was one for you, one for me. So if we give one person one Simply Wonderful, he would take one Simply Wonderful. Literally. I'm not exaggerating anything. Guru Maharaj said that that was his policy. Like this, he was the number one Simply Wonderful distributor in the Bhaktivedanta Mano in London. So he was naturally very, very big. And it was Sunday feast, and I'm not going to mention his name, but it was a Sunday feast, and the prasadam, obviously Bhaktivedanta Mano is world renowned for its prasadam, and there was a VIP line, and I think this devotee was, 30 or 40, number 30 or 40 in the queue, and there was samosa, gulab jamun, rasgulla, halwa, there was whatever you can think of, it was there. I think there was 20 or 30 different preparations. But the time it was the devotee's turn, there was literally nothing left. All the samosas were gone, all the gulab jamuns were gone, everything was gone. There was just rice, sabji, puri, halwa, just very, very little. He was number 40. Now, Guru Maharaj was standing right behind this devotee. This devotee just went absolutely crazy. So he started arguing with the server, why did everything get finished so quickly? And then behind the person serving the prasadam, there were 2 or 3 plates. Devotees are very smart. There were plates, but there was another plate covering it. So this devotee, he went and he swung the plates. I don't know how. He swung the plates, and the lids came off, and there was 8 samosas, 10 gulab jamuns, 15 rasgullas, all on, all those plates. So Guru Maharaj was essentially using this person to elaborate that in Krishna consciousness, are we here for prasadam? Are we here to actually, cultivate that taste of Krishna consciousness? Otherwise, if we are hankering over, the Sunday feast prasadam or hankering over some sort of sense gratification, it is prasadam, which is very, very good. We can purify ourselves in that way. But we need to be mindful that our objective is not to satisfy our senses. It's not, to taste. Our goal is to please Krishna. That is the primary goal of us in this movement. interesting word used in the translation is mundane. So this ocean of nescience is mundane. Now, mundane essentially means dull. Lackluster. It has no sort of brightness at all. So, in Krishna consciousness, we need to understand that we need to pursue something that is actually worthful. Otherwise, there is there's no reason to go after something lifelong if it is dull and has no value. Otherwise, this will just constantly give us more suffering. We know that there are people who work, for example, day in, day out. There is so much suffering. I can't even get into it. There's a lot of suffering that happens to people. But at the end of the day, they work their guts off like anything, just for those few moments of happiness, those few days they can go on a holiday, then they're working in for another year. So we need to understand that we don't want to become like these people. If we want to give our life and our tasks any value, Krishna has to be in the center. One of the main important verses in Bhagavatam, Chatusloki Bhagavatam, Rite Artam Yat Pratiyeta, I think we all know that verse. There, Lord Krishna is telling Brahma that anything that doesn't have Krishna in the center, it has no value at all. Now, here is Brahma about to create the whole material manifestation, but Krishna is making it very clear that if anything doesn't have Krishna in the center, it's worthless. There is no value whatsoever. So, to give ourselves value, we have to surrender by surrendering unto Krishna, we can actually attain the true happiness. Bhagavad Gita 2.14, we all know that famous verse, Mata Sparshas Kuntaya. In that verse, Krishna confirms that the happiness and distress that we all experience are nothing else but just like the winter and summer seasons. We know that as we go, winter just finished, summer is now happening. Last month, people were complaining that it was too cold, it was raining too much. In the next months to come, they'll complain that it's too warm. So here, Krishna is giving a very nice metaphor to explain that, a simile rather, that the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons, that is the equivalent to the flickering of happiness and distress. Happiness and distress will come. It will always keep flickering. But our main objective is to understand that we should not waste our lives trying to run after these. We can't, there's absolutely no reason whatsoever. And Kardama Muni uses the word trivial. Trivial means very little importance, very, very insignificant. Now, it's a very, very strong verse for those who are new to Krishna consciousness, but essentially pursuing material sense gratification is trivial. It's very, very insignificant. It isn't as important as devotional services. Okay, now I will go on to the final sentence, which is, however, O my Lord, you are so kind that you bestow mercy even upon them. So here, Kardama Muni is saying that Krishna is so kind that even those who are still hankering for some sort of sense gratification, Krishna is so merciful that he does provide for those people. His Holiness Mahavishnu Goswami Maharaj was giving an example. And he said, for example, if we are driving one day and we see, one sports car, for example. Our desire can be to have that sports car. We can say, I wish to have this sports car. He was saying that Krishna is so merciful that in a later lifetime we will obtain that desire. Unfortunately, though, we make too many desires. We have too many material desires. For example, when we wake up in the morning, when the alarm rings, our first desire is, I wish I could stay in longer. That's the first wish. Like this, I wish. It keeps going on and on and on. By the time we know it, we make too many wishes. I think there was one devotee who was saying, in one day, a person, I think, processes, I believe the number was 60,000 material thoughts, which is a lot of thoughts. So how many wishes, how many desires we actually have? By the time we keep going, it'll be stuck here. So it is very important to bear in mind that our desire is not to continue enjoying. Our goal is to somehow or other go back to Krishna and, reach that pure state of devotional service, because that's where all the happiness is. Otherwise, we're just hankering. We'll be here for God knows how long. So therefore, Krishna is merciful, that he does protect us, as in he does give us our desires, but our goal is not for sense gratification. At the same time, we should understand that Krishna also is so kind that out of his causeless mercy, he can still also protect us from falling into further material desires. Krishna obviously doesn't want to see his devotees being entangled. All of us internally, we are devotees. However, because of how this wishes 60,000 thoughts in one day, we've essentially got stuck and we're now in this material world. Now, Krishna, he is most merciful. Guru Maharaj was giving an example. He was giving a class last year, and he was saying that Krishna is the most merciful. Often we go, to police officers or to the teachers or professors or anyone. We try and get their mercy in some way or another. Krishna is the most merciful, though. So he, because he doesn't save us from the problems of the material world, we can sometimes think that why is Krishna doing this to me? For example, he gave a class when I think a few devotees lost a few family members, and he was saying that sometimes people can ask Krishna, why is this happening to me? But we need to understand that Krishna doesn't save us from the effect of the problem. Krishna saves us from the source of the problem. Very, very important point. Krishna doesn't protect us from the effect, but from the source of the problem. The source of all our problems, he said, is simply our desire and our attachment. Because we have some sort of attachment or some sort of desire, that is why problems are coming. Krishna, obviously, he will cut down our attachment and our desire from the root. People ask, why did this happen to, why did this happen to me? The goal isn't so that you will suffer. The goal is so that the desire and attachment, that will be cut down. So that's the reason we do devotional service. The reason we engage in devotional service, wake up among the Arti, read Srimad Bhagavatam, do our around 16 rounds of chanting. The main goal is to remove the sole root of our desire and attachment to this material world. I think we're nearly running short of time, but here, if we go to Srimad Bhagavatam, 5.19.27, a very, very nice point is the translation. The translation gives the statement that the Supreme Personality of Godhead fulfills the material desires of a devotee who approaches him with such motives, but he does not bestow benedictions upon the devotee that will cause him to demand more benedictions again. For example, going back to the earlier example of people going to the church asking for a loaf of bread. Now, obviously this will be on a daily basis. There are 365 days in a year. By the time you know it, it's just so much desires that are happening. Now, Krishna, Srila Prabhupada is saying, is that doesn't bestow benedictions so that they will demand more benedictions. Krishna gives devotee shelter at his lotus feet. The translation says, even though such a person does not aspire it, for that shelter satisfies all his desires. That is the Supreme Personality of Special Mercy. So our goal may not actually be to be free from this material world. But Krishna is so merciful that just by doing devotional service, indirectly, Krishna, through his special mercy, he does give devotees shelter at his lotus feet. Once we get shelter of his lotus feet, there's nothing else to aspire for anyway. We all know that famous example, Guru Maharaj. Guru Maharaj, I think, I'm not sure of the canto number, but he was saying when he was in front of Krishna, he did many, vigorous types of tapasya. I won't go into the details, but it was very, very elaborate. Eating after so many days and eating, leaves. But Guru Maharaj, after doing all of that tapasya, once Krishna was in front of him, his goal was initially to obtain a kingdom greater than Brahma himself. But then he said that what I was looking for is like broken pieces of glass, or shards of glass, whereas Krishna is like a diamond. So we need to understand that we can pursue so much opulence, but at the same time, Krishna at the end, he's so merciful that he gives the devotees proper intelligence. I'll conclude with one pastime. In the Skanda Puran, there is a pastime that is from the Mahabharata of Bhima. Now, this pastime isn't directly in the Mahabharata. Vyasadeva didn't put it in the Mahabharata, but Vyasadeva did also mention this in the Skanda Puran. So there, the pastime is given that after the Kurukshetra war actually happened, Bhima became very, very proud. He, obviously he killed, all the 100 sons of Dhritarashtra by himself. He attributed the whole success of the whole war to himself. Now, Krishna is merciful. Krishna knows this. But his primary benediction is that he tries to make sure that the devotees, the root of our problems are sorted out. That root for Bhima was that, that attachment and the desire for, sense gratification, being false ego. So to curb Bhima's pride, Krishna took him south. They went on Garuda, Krishna took him south, and they came across a lake that was many, many miles wide. So they got down from Garuda, there was this huge lake. And Krishna then told Bhima that you need to find the source of this lake. Where does this lake start from? So Bhima then obviously started, running and running. He ran for many, many miles, but he couldn't find the source of the lake. Then, as he was running, he encountered a number of very powerful asuras, very powerful demons. And Bhima, after, winning the whole Kurukshetra war in his eyes, he wasn't able to defeat those powerful asuras, and he ran to Krishna for shelter. There were a lot of rakshasas that were there, a lot of demons that were there, and Bhima simply wasn't able to defeat them. Then Krishna lifted up and threw the lake away, and the asuras were dispersed. Then Krishna then told Bhima that the lake that you were trying to run around, the lake that you were trying to find the source of, that was nothing else but Kumbhakarna's skull. So in the skull, he was saying in the eye socket, the water that filled up over so many millions and billions of years, that water was the lake that Bhima was trying to run around. And he was saying that the demons that were, fighting with Bhima, those rakshasas were none other than the descendants of Kumbhakarna. So what to speak, Bhima, obviously his pride got crushed immediately. Krishna would have been so powerful. The warriors that Krishna, Lord was with in Ramayana, we know that the Vankis that were there, they were a lot more powerful than Bhima. Bhima had that realization, and naturally his pride was curbed. So the whole purpose of this pastime is to illustrate that Krishna, his main objective is to make sure that our root of our problems are solved, not the actual problem itself. He could easily say, yes, Bhima, you are great, you are wonderful, this whole war you won. But no. Instead, he took Krishna down this whole pastime to try and curb his pride. On that note, it is 8:45. I'll conclude here. Just in summary, there were 3 points that we covered. The first point is that Lord Krishna's lotus feet takes us over the ocean of mundane nisayans. The second point is that those who are very, very unintelligent, Prabhupada describes with spoilt intelligence, they worship Krishna to get something in return, which is material and for sense gratification. The final point is that Krishna bestows his mercy even to these people because of his kindness in two different forms. Firstly, those who are in Krishna consciousness, he satisfies their desires in a future life, whereas those who are devotees, Krishna somehow or other, he tries and curbs what the root is. On that note, I'll conclude here. Thank you very, very much for tolerating me. I'm not qualified to sit. I think I listened to, so many people's classes who were here today. Please forgive me if I said anything wrong. I am just a younger brother, son, I don't know. Please bless me so I can summarize the progress in devotion service. Thank you very much. Srimad Bhagavatam Mahapurana ki, Shri Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaura Premanande.